Now that we have read the Gemara and understood the scenarios of the Gemara and understood the two positions of Ben Petura and Rabbi Akiva, now let's begin to learn Gemara. Learning Gemara means that we understand the svara, the mindset of Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura. In this way, you and I can join with the minds of Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura. We could, as if we are sitting in the Beis Medrash, in the study hall with them, trying to understand their thinking process. This is how we really learn Gemara. This is the critical thinking. This is called lomdus, where you analyze the Gemara, you investigate the Gemara, you add your mind to the Gemara's thinking. And this is how you can participate, and we can participate in the transmission of the oral law. When we try to understand the mindset of our sages, Chazal, and the Tanaim of the Mishnah and the Gemara, and we try to understand how they apply the 13 principles of Talmudic interpretation in order to understand what is God's will, then we enter into the spirituality of the Gemara. We understand the soul of the Gemara. What we're trying to understand here is, what is God's will about the priorities of life? We learn the verses of the Torah as interpreted by the Talmud, as interpreted by the Talmudic interpretations, the 13 Talmudic interpretations as brought down by our sages and how they understand them. Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura are two of them. And now we join our minds with them to understand their mindset. What were they thinking when they were arguing in the Gemara? When we do that, we are joining our soul with their soul. We're sitting down with Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura in their Beis Medrash, and we're arguing with them. This is how we can transcend generations. We can travel back 1800 years and understand that this is the process of Jewish law and that you and I are part of that process. Now let's learn together. Let's learn be'iyun. Let's have lomdus. Let's have investigation and critical thinking. What is the mindset of Ben Petura, who says that if I own the water, the canteen of water, I am not allowed to drink it myself. Rather, I have to share it with my neighbor. And even though we're both going to die, I have to do that. What is the mindset of Ben Petura? He says that that is akin to murder. Going back to our original scenario of Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z. And Mr. X says to Mr. Y, if you don't kill Mr. Z, I'm going to kill you. X is going to kill Y. Then Y is required by Jewish law to give up his life and not kill Z and allow himself to be killed by X in order not to be guilty of murder. And that's called Yeharag v'yal ya'avor. He shall allow himself to be Yeharag, to be killed, and not to be over, not to violate the mitzvah of not murdering. So Ben Petura applying that scenario to our case of Mr. Y owning water and Mr. Z not having any water, says Ben Petura. According to Rav Moshe Feinstein, he tells us that the thinking of Ben Petura is this, that the lack of water is just like Mr. X. Just like Mr. X says to Mr. Y, I'm going to kill you unless you kill Z, so too the thirst is coming to Mr. Y and saying, if you don't share that water with somebody else, you're both going to die. And therefore, according to Ben Petura, the scenario of the water owned by Mr. Y and Mr. Z does not have water, that's exactly like the situation of Mr. X telling to Mr. Y, you must kill Mr. Z. It's the thirst which is going to kill Mr. Y and Mr. Z, and therefore Mr. Y is not allowed to keep the water for himself. Why? Because the law of tzedakah, of charity, that he must take care of his neighbor, takes precedence over the water that he owns. Doesn't matter that he owns the water. It's that the thirst comes along and is threatening both of them, and they're both required to live. And therefore the lack of water is like a threat to Mr. Y, and Mr. Y therefore is not allowed to keep the water for himself. He must share the water. But they're both going to die. So Ben Petura says, it doesn't matter. It's better than they both die than Mr. Y murder Mr. Z by drinking the water himself. In other words, if Mr. Y drinks the water himself, even though he owns it, and he has an obligation to give tzedakah to Mr. Z, he is murdering Mr. Z by drinking the water himself. And according to Ben Petura, it applies also in the second scenario, where Mr. Z is in the bottom of a pit, and Mr. Y has a ladder at the top of the pit, and Mr. X says to Mr. Y, remove the ladder or I'm going to kill you. Is Mr. Y allowed to remove the ladder to save himself? According to Ben Petura, The X, the man who's requiring it, is thirst. Thirst comes along and says, you are both going to die. Therefore, if you drink the water, you are killing Mr. Z. Even though it's not an act of causation where you're actually murdering Mr. Z, nevertheless, if you remove the latter, you are taking away the opportunity for Mr. Z to live. Then according to Ben Petura, Mr. Y is not allowed to drink the water, because if he drinks the water, he's removing the latter. He's removing the opportunity for Mr. Z to save himself. Therefore, at most, they're both allowed to drink water. They're both going to survive for 2 or 3 hours, but they're both eventually going to die if they don't get water in 24 hours. That's the thinking of Ben Petura. Now comes along Rabbi Akiva and says the following. With pure logic, you would be right. However, we have a verse. The verse is V'chei achicha imach. That's the original Gemara. And you can see it here on your screen. It says in the Torah, V'chei achicha imach. It's God's mind, it's God's will that it means V'chei achicha imach. Your brother shall live with you. Which means if you own the water, if Mr. Y owns the water, then if he does not give the water to Mr. Z, because he owns the water, Mr. Y owns the water, the thirst is not acting like Mr. X saying to Mr. Y, if you don't share your water with Mr. Z, you are a murderer. No, because the verse of the Torah tells us God's mind, God's will in the Torah when he says, V'chei achicha imach, that your brother shall live with you, means that you come first. If you own the water, if the hashgacha pratis, if the divine providence is such that I own the water, Mr. Y owns the water, then he does not have to give the water to Mr. Z and share it with him, because then they'll both die. And therefore, because of a verse in the Torah, which is God's will, God's mind, therefore, Rabbi Akiva comes and interprets and says that therefore that's not the same case. He disagrees with Ben Petura. According to Rabbi Akiva, the verse comes to tell Mr. Y that he can drink the water himself, and if he does so, he is not a murderer. And that is the halacha. The halacha is like that if you own the water yourself, then it is not considered murder not to share the water with Mr. Y. And that is the pilpul, that is the lomdus, that is the deeper understanding of this Gemara. When you and I are trying to understand the mindset of Ben Petura and the mindset of Rabbi Akiva, to understand what is God's mind, what is God's will, then we are joining into the process of oral law. This gives us an opportunity, a spirituality to connect with our sages, to connect our minds with their mind, and collectively our mind is connecting with God's mind. Now that's spirituality, and that's Gemara, that's Talmud. Let's keep learning together. Stay tuned for Top 10 Talmud number 5.